Welcome to the Extra with LifePoint podcast. We're here with Mike Howerton. Mike, it's always a pleasure to be able to sit down, chat it up. I heard that your sermon was amazing. Didn't get to listen to it, but excited to ask you some questions about it. And your topic of your message was just all about just dating prior to marriage, and it's for those even that are married.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm wondering, before we get even anywhere with this, what is your definition of dating?
Yeah, so the interesting thing is dating is like a gift. It's a good thing, and it's given by God for a purpose. Mm-hmm. And so even for those who are married or even longtime married, I hope it was a real encouragement around keep going. Like let dating be the fuel of your relationship and the gasoline that is keeping that engine running, right? So there was a lot on that. But the idea of prior to marriage, it's helpful to know what is dating about, like what's the definition? And so we talked about dating being this authentic space, right? We talk about developing this healthy and authentic relationship with a potential marriage partner, and you're doing that through conversation-driven activities. So it's just a container, but the idea is use that container for the purpose that God has given us to use it for.
Yeah, no, that's great. And so I read over your notes a little bit, and I saw that you put this thing called progression of physical relationships.
That's right.
Now, this is just something that I just want to know out of my own curiosity, but what's the deal with that? What is that? How do we, what is that?
Sure. And you are married.
Yes.
So I think you do know the progression of physical relationships.
I think I do.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. So, I just want to make sure that we're on the same page.
Yeah. Exactly. I was joking at Marysville. I was like, hey, the Boeing engineers are stoked. It's like, oh, a checklist. Good. I could just go through.
Praise God.
But the idea is, it's not my idea. This comes out of a book called Life on the Edge by James Dobson. It's an older book, but it's what's beautiful about this is the progression. It's not like there's no should to it. There's no like shame in it. It's just a recognition that these actually are the 12 steps. Mm-hmm. So in other words, this is how physical intimacy happens, and these are the steps traveled. And what I think was powerful about going through that is, you recognize God's actually behind that whole thing. Yeah. That God's the one who has designed relationships to move through this progression. And then the second thing that I think is really helpful is that he doesn't design relationships to shift in reverse. So it's really important to sort of prize and understand the progression of physical relationships so that you can kind of take it slow, enjoy each step as it comes, and then not get yourself sort of over your skis where you're like, whoa, we got to back this thing up.
Right.
You can actually be proactive in sort of planning that as it goes.
Yeah. And then just a question that I'm just thinking if I can ask it. What would you say to that person that, they're in a relationship, they're in a dating relationship, and they did go farther than they should have. They progressed way more than they should have. And now they're listening to your sermon today, or they want to change, they want to apply this. How would you encourage them to start?
Man, what a great question. Colin, that's fantastic. And the point is, it's not impossible to reverse in a relationship. It's just incredibly difficult because you've already opened then some of these doors. And of course, they're enjoyable doors. God made them to be enjoyable. And so it's not that you can't shift in reverse. It's that it's just difficult. Build some accountability in, I talk in the message about the two things are, one, set your standards, invite the wisdom of God and then use the scriptures, but set your standards and then verbalize those standards. So to your point, if you've already crossed lines and you feel, guilt, shame, condemnation, then that's a great time for the two of you to do that exact thing. No, let's set our standards and let's verbalize these things and let's make sure that we're on the same page. And then invite others into that accountability. Well, let me just start by saying, if you're walking under shame, guilt, condemnation, you need to understand the power of forgiveness that Jesus has for you and the power of grace that Jesus has for you. So I'm not the kind of guy that says you always have to do this, you always have to. I'm more like, could you walk in the freedom and grace that Christ has and then set your standards for purity and then do that? a lot of times when couples have crossed into physical intimacy, the thing that works best for them is to actually call it quits, or at least call it quits for a while, and then go back to the beginning and begin to build friendship, because really your friendship is what's going to take a relationship for the long haul.
Yeah.
That eros, right? E-R-O-S, that physical romantic attraction, that's like a short spike, but it's the friendship that you want to build.
Right, definitely. And it's just good to take it slow in general. In youth today, we did a little message, and one of the things was on relationships and how we are to like take it slow to let it grow. Ooh. And I talked about
pretty good slogan right there.
I know, it's great. Yeah. I don't own it. I didn't come up with it. But I was talking about how, like, before I met my wife, and, I met her at church, and then COVID happened. And it kind of put a pause on all of my plans of what I wanted to do, dating, relationships, all that kind of stuff. But it showed me the value of taking it slow in those early stages of relationship. Would you be able to kind of speak to that for maybe somebody that's wants to date somebody, wants to jump in, like, I think that this girl's my wife, or, anything like that? Like, what would you advise to that person?
Yeah, well, I had the privilege of doing college ministry for like 5 years, 6 years. It was so fantastic. Yeah, but I can't tell you how many times, like, oh, I've met the one, he's the one, she's the one. You're like, okay, hold your horses. But that idea of, go slow and let it grow.
Yeah.
It helps when you think, like, what are you trying to grow?
Yeah.
Because, mushrooms grow overnight, but then they're gone.
Yeah.
Oak trees take forever to grow, but they'll last, centuries, millennia. So the idea is, know what it is that you are architecting, right? Set those standards, build those standards together. Yeah. I share a story about how I have the privilege of doing a wedding next Saturday, and the couple is Mark and Irina, and she was in Ukraine, he's from here, and they started an online relationship 5 years before they met one another in person.
Wow.
So you could imagine how conversation rich that relationship was, and really getting to know likes and dislikes and personality and adventure and everything else. Yeah. And then, of course, there is a threat of war. So then he leaned in and was able to sponsor her son, her parents, all to come over here. And it was an incredible process. Yeah. But what a great story, right? Like that is a romance and a story to tell the generations.
Yeah. And a beautiful foundation for now their marriage.
That's right.
That they have a firm foundation now. That's so cool. I want to close with this. You mentioned 30 dates, 30 first dates. Yes. And now, I heard that. I'm like, how do I get this list? How do I, my wife's probably already blown up my phone because she listened to it. But for a guy listening, what would you recommend out of that list? Like maybe your favorite one, or how do they get that list?
Right. So good question. I talked to Pastor Alexio, and he has the list that was a part of the message. So if you want, just email Alexio, and it's easy to just get the cut and paste. But I would say, like, what would be my favorite list? It's the creative side of things. So I mentioned, like, I like ideas where you and your partner would dress up to the nines, like look just total dapper. And then you do open houses of like multi-million-dollar homes and just pretend you're completely unimpressed and bored with everything. To me, it's stuff like that would be super fun. Or I mentioned that I actually have done this before, where you do a date and you pick them up in a U-Haul, and then you back your U-Haul overlooking, let's just say, the Puget Sound. Yeah. And you open it up, and there's a couch and a rug and lamps and your picnic back there or whatever. And so you do something like that, and that's kind of that's a memorable type of
Mike,
experience.
you're a romantic. That's awesome. I want to be more romantic, so I'm going to get that list from Alexio. But we appreciate you. Thank you for hanging out with us on LifePoint Extra. Can't wait to do it again.
Yeah. Blessings.
Make sure to like, share, and subscribe to stay up to date with all of our LifePoint Extra episodes.